Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by TheLines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast, and we roll along, baby. We are in the conference finals. We made it, mama. We got the T-Wolves taking on those Mavericks. Also got that Eastern Conference Finals set up with the Pacers and the Celtics. We're going to be taking a look at conference finals futures picks in this one as we look at these series as a whole and get some of our best bets in there for you. Got plenty of other playoff action here for these conference finals. Also got some props up for the series, each series as well. And then we also are diving right into Boston and Indy Game 1, which kicks off on Tuesday night. So continue to follow along and subscribe to that page. Don't miss any of these picks that we're bringing you and all the analysis and projections, obviously, as well. Also want you to head to thelines.com and use everything that we're putting up on the site right now to help you with all these series prices as these things get tipped off Tuesday and Wednesday night in Game 1s. Nate, let's go ahead and kick it off with your first finals future here for the conference finals future, and we're kicking it off with that Western Conference series.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I bet when that Game 7 went final was the Wolves to go -1.5 in this series against Dallas, or so the winner in 6 or less. And it was +150 at the time. You probably can't get better than +130 now. I think it's also worth a wager on them to win Game 1 and win the series. Game 1 at home, of course. And Dallas has lost 5 straight Game 1s with 97 points or fewer in 4 of them. And on the road for these last 4, they were just like no-shows. And look, I think you play with fire if you let these Wolves keep going. Like, Dallas is probably going to try to rectify that, of course, and like come out stronger here. And they do get a little bit of the layoff here, an extra day on the Wolves. But I mean, we just saw these Wolves like after a pretty rough first half. Like, let me put it this way: if Anthony Edwards shoots 6 for 24 and you beat the defending champs, could you imagine SGA shooting 6 for 24 and the Thunder being anywhere within sniffing distance of this Dallas team? No, This is a really it's because of their defense. It's also because they have a supporting cast and in a guy in Cat who seems to have figured out how the playoffs are played a little bit. I mean, he's been pretty good. For aside from that Mother's Day slip up where maybe, he had a chat with Mama afterwards, and he's been centered since. And Luka, here's the intangible I'm talking about, is anything but centered. Like, he is the worst leader among a top player because he just spends all of his time talking to the refs. Like, it's a timeout, Luka. Like, we're talking about adjustments and stuff, and he's just over there like chatting with Tony Brothers about something that happened 3 plays ago, and like it just doesn't. I can't see him not getting on tilt here with McDaniels all up in his jersey the entire game. Like, he's definitely going to be frustrated. He's going to lose his focus in some of these games. Like, he'll come back and he'll bounce back and be like, I'm not talking to the refs this game. And then it'll turn. But like, and you could see how it just didn't endear the refs to them in that Game 6 against OKC, right? Then he starts getting no calls whatsoever. And, yeah, I mean, but look, I'm not trying to be so reductive to be like, Minnesota beat the champs. They had all these great numbers, and like, it's a different matchup. Like, they have a different challenge now. Their size might be a weakness in some ways versus such a strength against Jokic. But I mean, they do have on surface level, like, 2 guys to throw at Kyrie and Luka and Ant and Jaden. And if Jaden McDaniels is going to hit corner threes and be a weapon on offense as well, this thing's over. Like, I don't think that Dallas can survive if these guys are going to play off Ant well enough, like they did down the stretch there, that like how Kat did in those last 2 and how Jaden did. I think that's kind of the key to unlock here, because I only worry about the Wolves' offense. Like, their defense is obviously just phenomenal, and it's going to be tough sledding. Dallas's defense has been great, but they've also not really faced much in terms of, like, OKC was experimenting with what it's like in the playoffs, a bunch of rookies around Shea pretty much, and then they got like half the Clippers. So I need to see it from Dallas, but I think what you're going to see in Game 1 is a Wolves win, and then these prices will not be as good.
Yeah, a couple things. So I have to chuckle and call out that we called Luka not a leader of men in the best like sort of NFL impression that we could think of. Is he a leader of men? I mean, I joke, but the answer has to be no. I agree with you. There was a change. I'm sure you noticed it. It happened in the last 2 games. It happened in Game 5, and then it also happened in Game 6 for this Mavericks team. Luka was locked in a little bit more. I saw a lot less complaining. I mean, he's dastardly, don't get me wrong, but there was a
in
lot less
5,
complaining.
and then it just evaporated in Game 6, and he was
Game six,
only
it wasn't the
complaining.
save. Okay, yeah, game six, it wasn't the save. We had a one game of reprieve from the freaking kvetching that we get from Luca, and we move on. So I can't disagree. I will say though, I am disagreeing in general with the premise that this doesn't go 7. I just think it's worth the price. I'm taking Dallas in 7 games, and I'll just speak to this series before we get into Boston and Indiana, because my take on this series is like, well, my take on Dallas, let me start there, is that like I've been saying since they got Daniel Gafford. I mean, because the beginning of the season, my tune was different than February, let's say February 8th. My tune was different than February 25th, right? Where it was like, oh, wow, maybe this Daniel Gafford has something going here. Oh my God, maybe this PJ Washington has something going here on defense. You add that to Derrick Jones Jr. and a whole host of pretty good defenders that are for their role players, and like, I like this, man. And if Luka is going to do Luka stuff, then yeah, you've also got one of the best closers in NBA playoffs in the last like 15 years in Kyrie Irving. Let's say 10 years in Kyrie Irving. When was that finals? It was 2017, 16, right? So almost, 8 to 10 years where it's like, look, dude, the dude is undefeated in closeout games in the NBA playoffs right now for his career, which is absolutely fascinating. I think that's enough to help you get there. I think the thing is, as much as Luka might seem like a head case, is a head case at times. Not seems like one. He gets away with saying stuff to the refs that I'm sure other guys would not get away with saying. But like, even in those situations, the team doesn't really hold his temperament. They kind of seem to hold like Jay Kidd's temperament more than anything, which I think just continues to be another feather in the man's cap and it's a cap that we used to just ridicule not even like 4 years ago. I mean, I remember us starting off the season being like, whatever team Jay Kidd's coaching, it's a fade. And now like the defense that he showed in this last series, where he played that sort of 1-1-3, if you will, with Kyrie against Shea, where he basically had a QB spy sort of player to make sure that once Shea got into a scoring position inside the 3-point line, he was uncomfortable. I'm not saying you can just throw that at Ant Edwards, but there's something there, and there's a bit of a blueprint on how to slow Ant down. So if the others don't come along for the ride, and predominantly I mean Cat and to a degree Mike Conley, although he's about as consistent as you can get too in the playoffs, like more so the other guys. Jaden McDaniels had an insane game there in Game 7 to help them win that. I mean, most of his buckets were the buckets that either kept them in it in the first half or were just a major part of the comeback in the second half. And honestly, like, he and Derrick Jones Jr. kind of like, Spider-Man meme at times, where it's just like, well, if this goes in, then we're looking great. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't, because those are the dudes that they're going to get those shots to and be like, yeah, okay, I guess you're allowed to shoot a little bit more. We know Dallas struggles to cover the corner. So if Jaden McDaniels gets hot, then that's going to be a place where he's shooting a lot from, is the corner 3. I get all that. But the defense came in and goes, all right, well, someone else is going to have to beat us. Shai's going to get 30 to 34 points, and that's it. And then if he gets 8 to 10 assists, okay, that means the other dudes are hitting their shots. And I'm not saying that Minnesota is incapable of that, but that's not how you want to have to win necessarily, in my opinion. Then it comes to the defense. And for the defense here, yeah, but both of these teams are very, very, very good. Dallas, after the trade, was 8th in defensive rating. Before that, they were 22nd. You're not going to see many bigger jumps than that in the way that a team can guard. So similar to the Eastern Conference Finals, there's not much regular season, precedence here for us to look at and go, well, this game is probably in the regular season is probably somewhat of a solid simulation of what we're going to see here in the finals. Ain't nothing that was a legit simulation of these finals here. Not that you can get that too easily. Obviously, it's regular season versus the playoffs, but even the lineups and the guys who were in and having this current iteration of the Mavericks, that wasn't really afforded to us to get any of that. But I'm looking at the playoffs now and I'm going, Dallas looks pretty stable. 4-2 at home, 4-2 on the road. That's a big part of it to me, is like they don't get rattled wherever they are. They're a plus 3.3 in their plus minus both places. They're exactly the same in both spots there. The points, 2 more points at home, 2 fewer on, 2 more points at home, 2 fewer on the road. But 107, 105, I think this is going to continue to be really low scoring series. Neither of these teams are in a rush to get down the floor. So I think a lot of unders are going to be in play, but I'm going to take it to go 7 based on the fact that like, I do think it's damn near a coin toss with like maybe like a 51-49 edge to Minnesota. But I don't think that like, you're going to see some 2 big lineups from Dallas. I do think you'll get a little bit more lively on the floor with Daniel Gafford, which, going to leave an odd man out at this point for Dallas, but like they can use a bit more of a quality big lineup if they're able to play that, and that'll be pretty dependent, I think, on Lively being able to avoid having to just stay down low. Like he's done a lot more screen high, dive to the basket, or sort of stand in the dunker spot. I mean, they play really similarly, but eventually, like I think if Cat turns into a problem from them, that would be the X factor of this series in general. And I'm still not ready to just like knight Cat with this like playoff, performer sort of accolade or anything yet, just because he had a couple good games in that Nuggets series, which he did, and like maybe he's here to go, but I got to see it first before I'm like, ooh, maybe this is something I need to hedge out of. But I think at plus 215, we're going to see this thing at 2-2, and if we see it at 2-2, then I think we're in a good spot to get into 7 at that point. I know Minnesota's been incredible on the road. You brought the point up before we started recording that like Minnesota's road performances have been insane, so don't just assume that Dallas wins a game 7 because they're at home. I agree with that entirely, but I still think one of those between 5 and 6, both of those are toss-ups. I don't really give the Wolves that much of a home court advantage either, to be honest with you. So I think that's also what helps give you this sort of like 50-50 shot at both these teams coming away with the series. So might as well take the 7 games.
Not much of a home court advantage. I mean, nope. Somebody said that game six crowd in Minnesota was the most. I mean, granted, they won by 40, but it was the biggest home court like noise that they had heard all season. In any playoff game. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Like, great, Dallas is home in the road about equal against this competition they played. Minnesota's 5-1 with a +9 net on the road, and it took the greatest offensive performance in recent memory for them to lose in Denver from Jokic, who then they promptly shut down. Look, I think the offense will come and go with a guy like Cat, and we'll see if Dallas can replicate what Denver did defensively on Ant. But I mean, it's at the end of the day, that defense. And if you have Luka shooting 20% from 3, roughly, which is what he's at in the playoffs, if you have Kyrie being oddly passive and struggling with a big body defender like J-Dub, and now he's going to get the exact same kind of body type in Ant, and like, I just don't know where Dallas is going to get much offense either. Like, they're not going to be able to crash the boards against this team as they did against OKC. Like, all their advantages are kind of going to evaporate in the face of the best defense in the league right now. So I think Minnesota has more time to kind of work through things and figure out how to score enough. So that's my second pick, is just parlaying the two, because if you didn't get Wolves Celtics futures together for that to be the finals matchup a couple weeks ago, and then somehow held strong through the 3 straight losses to Denver and held that ticket, you can still get one now at about 2-1 on your money if you take both teams to win in 6 or less. So Celtics in 6, I actually think that's the most likely outcome. I know 5 is the shortest odds for Celtics to win against the Pacers, but plus 400 for them to win in 6 here. I just think there's enough variance in this series with how many threes that everybody takes and how fast Indy plays. And if they get rolling, like they can really get rolling. And we've seen the Celtics, like every game is a double-digit result. Like it's just crazy how Jekyll and Hyde they can be at times. So I think Indy steals multiple games, or steals. I mean, they could win one at home. So far, Boston has been way better on the road, but they've also just been playing like these shells of a team, like the B team for both Miami and Indy and Cleveland, and trying to do this in Indy in terms of just like posting a 94 defensive rating throughout the entire game. Like, I don't know if that's going to be their roadmap to success. I think they drop one in Indy, and we'll see if they start 2-0 here. I mean, that's definitely what they're looking for. Get Porzingis back in game 3, maybe, but they might, kind of take the long view with that and wait for him. Like, I mean, I don't want to take too much faith in Halliburton after what he did in game 7. Kind of a front runner performance, right, against the backup Knicks. Like, we can discredit the Pacers just as much as you want to discredit the Celtics for their last 2 results. But I think the way Indy's getting secondary playmaking from TJ McConnell, of course, and Nembhard, who's stepping up big time on offense, at least. Like, yeah, I think you can trust them to get a game here, for Nesmith to be good enough on Tatum or Brown, whichever one he's trying to lock up. And for them to be in the series until Porzingis is back at full strength, like, I don't think we can trust the Celtics to just roll this team every time.
No, I don't think that at all. obviously you can use the same logic on Indy that you were using on Dallas of playing not as good a competition, which would hold even more true for Indy, since the Knicks lost their starting five basically throughout the playoffs and didn't have Julius Randle ever. But then they lost the other key components of that starting five, and whatever you want to say about Josh Hart's health. I don't have the mental capacity to go into that Knicks loss. So let me keep it to this one where I agree with the Celtics winning this thing in 5 or 6. I think that's what you have to choose between. And to be honest, like, I think 5 is still the number. I think they go into game 5, 3-1. And that's really what this comes down to, is going into a game 5, 3-1. I cannot possibly imagine Indiana, unless they just went completely bonkers from 3. But like, even in that game where they just didn't miss a single shot in game 7 there against the Knicks and set a record for the best playoff performance in the history of the NBA with 67% from the field, or at least a closeout game. It was either the best ever or the best in a closeout playoff
best
game.
Ever, any playoff game.
It was okay. That's what I thought. It'd be pretty hard to replicate that. Shooting 72% in the first half. I think that there's going to be a game of that ilk, not necessarily that high of percentage for them, but they're going to have at least one game where they go crazy. And that would be the only way that I differ from you. So I took the exact series at 4-1 for the Celtics. There's something there. I think it's safe to say, like, the Pacers win game 2, 3, or 4. Those are one of the that doesn't help us much with these bets, but you can. I ended up saying, like, I chose to say that they win game 3, so you can get the exact series outcome as well, where you get Boston lose game 3 and win in 5. That's plus 700. I also thought about what they've done twice this season, this postseason already, which is lose game 2 and win in 5. And that's plus 1,200 if you want that exact series outcome. So I led with that, but was like, it's not like that's a guarantee. At the same time, like, it's 2 or 3 to me more than anything. I think it's 2 or 3. I don't think they get swept. So if they lose, if they're down 3-0, I think they win 4 for game 4 for the Pacers here. But I don't think that they go into game 5 with tied up 2-2 essentially. So in that situation, I do put the Celtics in good position to just step on their neck. And now I'm sitting at plus 700 with a ticket if they win game 5, sitting at 3-1. That's kind of how. Well, I'm sorry, plus 225 specifically with that one. But if they can manage to have it be game 3, and I chose game 3 for this Pacers team to win over instead of like game 2, mostly because that home stuff for Indy is legit. I do believe in their ability to go back home and just be a different team at this point. It was pretty much the way they played all season. And then you look at the stuff in the playoffs: 6-0 at home versus 2-5 on the road, 119 scored per game, allowing 104 when they're in their own building, 110 scored on the road versus allowing 116, just a complete inverse of what they do when they're playing at home and away. And then the variance is really what it comes down to. Like what you were saying, like 3 of the biggest 3-point variance teams are still left in the playoffs when you throw the Mavs in there and on top of these 2 Eastern Conference squads. So that does give you a little bit of like, this is a tough projection. Are they going to make the threes? Are they going to take away the threes? And we know Indy wants to get everything going to the basket as well, which is kind of why KP is so helpful for this series. Not kind of, entirely why, right? And the other thing about KP that's interesting to me, I did not like the fact that we tried to Willis Reed OG Anunoby back onto the floor in terms of the Knicks. That just seemed terrible to me. And I would worry about that with KP. Not that they're going to be in the exact same situation, but that in game 3, don't just throw him out. Like, have a game plan that you're ready for going into it and say, this is what we expect for him. Not like we're going to see how he goes and throw him out there and see how he does, as much as we're going to play him this is rotation, this is his rotation, and now we're going in with a game plan, and these players can feel some stability rather than like being like, maybe OG is going to play, which changes the complexion of everything on both sides of the balls for the Knicks. And now it's like, well, what do we do with that? We don't necessarily have this strong game plan. So if KP comes back, I still see his minutes at like 18 to 20 limited in game 3. I could also see that just be a little bit of a hiccup of like, okay, we need to figure out how to get him back in here. It didn't quite work out the way we wanted in game 3 if we're the Celtics. So let's like ease him into it and then go from there. So I think that makes game 3 just another sort of target for me in terms of the game that I would say Indy has the best chance of winning. In addition to, if they are coming back home down 2-0, we know what that looks like for teams that are back at home down 2-0 with that momentum. And then you add how much better this team plays at home, especially in the playoffs. And then the 3-point variance, just to finish the point, 14 threes for Indy in these playoff wins versus 11.4 in their losses. Boston even more stark, 15 threes in their wins, 10 in their 2 losses on average that they hit against the Heat and then the Cavs there in those game twos. So like you've got to hit your threes. But I mean, Indy's 3-point defense, as good as it's been, I kind of reset this stuff here, man. Like you can't just be like, okay, well, they tried to play the same defense on like Jalen Brunson and even Dame in two games this playoffs, and it just bit them in the butt that Rick Carlisle was unwilling to sort of be a little bit more versatile with his defense. And then we see that change entirely in the last like 4 games of the series for the Knicks, really the last 3, if you will. It's the last 4 games of that series versus the Knicks, where then they change up the defense a bit. He's a little bit more willing to, like, let's say, blitz dudes out on the 3-point line, or at least like hedge a little bit more effectively with dudes on the pick and roll, so that the ball handler is not just left wide the hell open afterwards. And that ball handler is going to continue to be mostly Jason Tatum and then Jaylen Brown when he's off the floor, and then some Derek White at times. But for the most part, it's going to be the Jays running that pick and roll, and that's your 2 best players. So, obviously, like that's going to be a huge part of it. We'll see how versatile Carlisle's defense is in this series moving forward, but I would expect him to remain versatile, start out versatile, and remain that way, which should limit some threes for the Celtics, but they're still going to get them up with that ball movement and 5 dudes on the floor at all times that can shoot. That'll probably be their calling card. I think the Pacers pull 1 out of this, and we see this thing end in 5.
Yeah, I mean, you make a strong case because I kind of really have to have the Pacers split 2-2 because I don't see them winning a game 5 in Boston. You could say, well, they won a game 7 in MSG, but that was a completely different situation. Yes, and gonna keep bringing it up, but no, the Celtics are not going to rush KP back out. Like, they've taken a very long view with this, as they've basically gotten a bye to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they're going to continue to preach patience. And I would not worry about him out there limping. But yes,
right.
I think a minutes limit, totally makes sense. But look, Celtics 5-6 doesn't matter. Just take the parlay with the Wolves because we feel good about that.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to like talk myself into the Mavs being able to pull this thing out. They'd have to get it to 7 at that point. And I think the Wolves just have an answer to everything that you could possibly throw at them. And I agree with that. Celtics Wolves ain't gonna be a bad finals, my man, if that's what we're treated to. So we'll look forward to hopefully getting all that stuff right here. Continue to follow along. That's all the time we've got in the series futures for you guys. We've also got series props where we can get some player props and some other stuff up for the entire series, which is great. Then jumping right into that Boston and Pacers series as well, game 1. So make sure you're subscribed to that page and continue to follow along. And until we do see you next, happy betting.